and welcome to the turbulent world with me, James M. Dorsey, as your host. Ahmed al Shara, aka Abu Mohammed al-Jolani, would like you to think he is a changed man. These days, Mr. al-Jolani, a 41-year-old one-time Al Qaeda and Islamic State operative with a $10 million US bounty on his head, no longer spews jihadist fire and brimstone. Instead, he preaches pluralism, religious tolerance, diversity, and forgiveness, as his Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS rebels take control of Damascus, the Syrian capital. With the departure to Moscow of toppled President Bashar al-Assad, ending the Assad family's 54-year hold on Syria, many in the country and the international community ask which one is the real Mr. al-Jolani. In a recent interview, Mr. al-Jolani, the face of the Syrian rebels, insisted that his evolution was natural. A person in their 20s will have a different personality than someone in their 30s or 40s, and certainly someone in their 50s. This is human nature, Mr. al-Jolani said. The real Mr. al-Jolani will likely emerge in the way he approaches the formation of a post-Assad transition government, as well as the rights, security, and safety of minorities, including those like the Shiite Muslim Alawites, from which the Assads hail and who long supported their brutal rule. Moreover, even those who question the sincerity of his conversion suggest that Mr. al-Jolani may be the one rebel commander who can hold Syria together. There is no local military power to stand up to or compete with Jolani, said an associate of the rebel leader at the time when he still publicly identified himself as a jihadist. The former associate warned that if Mr. al-Jolani fails, Syria, like Libya, will become a state torn apart by rival armed militias. Mr. al-Jolani hasn't changed at all, but there's a difference between being in battle, at war, killing, and running a country, the former associate said. He suggested Mr. al-Jolani's more moderate and conciliatory posture stemmed from a recognition that the Islamic State's sectarian bloodlust was a mistake. The former associate said Mr. al-Jolani now considers himself a statesman. He suggested that the rebel leader may follow through on suggestions that he turn the group into a political party by transferring its military wing to a reconstituted Syrian military. Meanwhile, Hayat Tahrir moved quickly to safeguard public buildings in Damascus and manage the presence of heavily armed factions in the capital. We will soon ban gatherings of armed people, said Ahmed al Sheikh, a Hayat Tahrir security official. On Tuesday, the rebels appointed Mohammed al Bashir as caretaker prime minister for 4 months. It was not immediately clear what the next step would be. Mr. al Bashir ran the rebel led Salvation Government in their northern Idlib stronghold, and since Hayat Tahrir launched its offensive, has assisted captured cities, including Aleppo, Hama, and Homs, in installing post-Assad governance structures. Beyond ensuring domestic security and stability, Mr. al-Jolani will need to secure international support for the reconstruction and rehabilitation of traumatized and war-ravaged Syria. To do so, Mr. al-Jolani and Hayat Tahrir will have to convince Syrian minorities, segments of Syria's majority Sunni Muslims, and the international community that they have genuinely changed colors and are not wolves in sheep's clothes. A questionable human rights record that has persisted long after they disavowed jihadism compounds Hayat Tahrir and Mr al-Jolani's reputational problems. The United Nations accused the group as recently as last August of resorting to extrajudicial killings, torture, and the recruitment of child soldiers. HTS detained men, women, and children as young as 7. They included civilians detained for criticizing HTS and participating in demonstrations, the UN Human Rights Council said in a report. These acts may amount to war crimes, the Council said. Even so, this week, United Nations Special Envoy for Syria, Geir Pedersen, acknowledged that Hayat Tahrir has sought to address concerns in recent days. The reality so far is that the HTS and also the other armed groups have been sending good messages to the Syrian people, Mr. Pedersen said. They have been sending messages of unity, of inclusiveness. We have also seen reassuring things on the ground, Mr. Pedersen added. Mr. Pedersen was referring to rebel assistances given to minorities, a pledge not to impose restrictions on women's clothing, amnesty for conscripted personnel of Mr. al-Assad's military, the rebels reaching out to Assad government officials, and efforts to safeguard government institutions. U.S. officials echoed Mr. Pedersen, despite the U.S. designation of Hayat Tahrir as a terrorist organization. Against the backdrop of his track record in recent years in administering the northern Idlib region, the last rebel-held stronghold in Syria when the civil war's battle lines were frozen in 2020, Mr. al-Jolani has sought to project an image of tolerance, reconciliation, and ability to deliver public goods and services. In recent years, Mr. Jolani has turned Idlib, Hayat Tahrir's northern base, and historically the country's poorest province, into his fastest growing region, despite his autocratic rule and frequent Syrian and Russian airstrikes. To Mr. al-Jolani's credit, there were no major reports of attacks on Christians, Alawites, and other minorities, or of acts of revenge against representatives of the Assad regime, including the military, and no mass looting, as Hayat Tahrir fighters took over cities and towns, including Damascus. That is not to say that everything unfolded incident-free. A Damascus resident reported that unidentified armed men had knocked on the door of an acquaintance and asked about his religion. A neighbor returned home to find that armed men had broken down a door and looted his apartment. Similarly, a nearby government building was looted despite instructions from rebel leaders against violating public property. The rebels imposed an overnight curfew in Damascus to maintain law and order. Earlier, a man in Hama told prisoners sitting on the ground with their hands tied behind them in a video on social media, "We will heal the hearts of the believers by cutting off your heads, you swine." Meanwhile, with Israel bombing Syrian arsenals of strategic weapons, including suspected chemical weapons sites, Hayat Tahrir missed an opportunity to unequivocally garner trust. In a statement, the group said it will safeguard the country's remaining chemical stock weapon piles and ensure they aren't used against citizens. The Assad regime used chemical weapons on several occasions on Syrian civilians. In the wake of Mr. al-Assad's fall, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, or OPCW, the United Nations chemicals watchdog, said it had contacted unidentified Syrian authorities with a view to emphasizing the paramount importance of ensuring the safety and security of all chemical weapons related materials and facilities. Hayat Tahrir responded, saying, "We clearly state that we have no intention or desire to use chemical weapons or any weapons of mass destruction under any circumstances. We will not allow the use of any weapon, whatever it may be, against civilians, or allow them to become a tool for revenge or destruction. We consider the use of such weapons a crime against humanity," the group said. The group would have done itself a service by offering to destroy under international supervision what chemical weapon stockpiles fall into its hands, and or ask OPCW to assist in searching for such weapons. Thank you for joining me today. Thousands across the globe are avid readers and listeners of the turbulent world. Join them in helping maintain and expand the column and podcast by becoming a paid subscriber. Paid subscribers have access to the full archive, exclusive posts and polling, can leave comments, join debates, and know they are supporting independent writing, reporting, and analysis that lets the chips fall where they fall. You can contribute by going to jamesmdorsey.substack.com and choosing one of the subscription options. Thank you for your support and loyalty. Take care and best wishes.